In Virginia, Mr. Walker, and my grandfather, about whom I shall talk mainly, was Captain George David Hitchens of Smith Island, Virginia. Now, this is the Lee is Smith Island, Captain John Smith, Smith Island, not the Smith Island off the coast of Maryland. I don't think that's on the ocean, is it? And this Smith Island is between the Atlantic Ocean and Chesapeake Bay, right at the tip of the shore. And my grandfather's father was keeper at Smith Island. When he retired, my grandfather was asked to have that position, and he took it. And later, the old life-saving service became part of the United States Coast Guard. I think that was about 1913, and my grandfather was in Captain at Smith Island, Captain George Hitchens in the Coast Guard. He retired when I was just 2 years old, 1915, I think, much to his chagrin, because he felt he was still quite young, in the prime of life. And let me see now, what else do you want to know about the shore? I have here
what life was like at living at Smith Island. Where you remember them talking about it.
I remember the boats that they had for I think I have a picture of one, for the life-saving service. Government boats were open boats, and they went out in the storm in those boats to rescue people and to help people stranded on their ships. But I do remember being told that you could not capsize, but it really was rough duty. I remember his telling me once, or my sister's telling me once, about a shipwreck when they brought everyone off the ship onto the life-saving boat. And he said that it was so cold, it was a snowstorm. I heard him say that the thing worse than a fog was a terrific snowstorm where trying to see was concerned. And he said they removed all the people from this ship except one man who walked off under his own steam, and he had on a lightweight jacket, and his background, of course, was Norwegian. I suppose he was used to the North Sea, probably. And Harry will tell you all about the Massasoit. I'm going to give you a bit of background on the Massasoit. I had heard about the record. There's Harry now. Isn't that Harry? Good morning. Well, come in and give me a hug, please. How are you, dear?
Fine.
Nice to see you. Have you recovered from the wedding?
Yeah. Thank you.
Let him tell you about the Massasoit. But I'm going to give you the background first, how it happened.
You better give the background.
I was the weekend guest of Pope Kellum. We went to a dinner party, at Baxley and Elizabeth Tanker's house for Harry's parents, Mr. and Miss Holcomb, Sherman Holcomb. And I was sitting on a sofa with Harry's mother, and we were just making casual conversation. And she mentioned that the men in her family had always been interested in the sea, sailing and so forth. And I said, well, some of the men in my family too. My grandfather was captain at Smith Island, and I remembered stories of shipwrecks, and I remember one of them was the Massasoit, and when I said the Massasoit, Harry's mother looked very startled, very surprised, and she looked across the room to his father, Mr. Sherman Holcomb, and said, "Sherman, come here, come here. This girl knows about the Massasoit." I said, "I don't really. I happen to remember it because it's the name you will remember. But my older sister does." I told you she was 18 years older than I, and she used to spend much of her childhood vacations in summer on Smith Island with my grandparents, her grandparents too. But anyway, they came down and carry on with, and the Bible too. You can tell them back then. You can tell them back then.
We have,
Hmm?
we have to get him.
Use the word in addition to getting annoyed.
My name is Harry Holcomb. I've lived on the Eastern Shore since 1977, and I'm interested in maritime and schooner history. And it turns out that there's a connection here. And shall I proceed with the story? Well, my great grandfather had a fleet of coastal schooners, 4 and 5-masted schooners that sailed out of New Haven, Connecticut. And my father had traced what happened to all these ships, and he learned that the Massasoit had gone ashore and wrecked somewhere down in Chesapeake area on a Smith Island, and we didn't know any more about it than that. And when I moved here, it really occurred to me to try to pin this down where the ship had ended up. But the story is that it was told by Virginia's sister, Miss Gladys, who was in her 90s and had an absolutely wonderful memory. And she remembers the story of the wreck of the Massasoit exactly as told.
She went on it, actually.
And she went on it. She used to go.
Your skylight.
She used to go on it.
I didn't even bring that to show them. Excuse me. Go ahead.
But the ship was going to Norfolk for a load of coal, and it was empty, and it got into a bad northeaster, and got blown ashore on Smith Island. And Captain George Hitchens and his crew had to go out in the lifeboat and save the crew off the Massasoit. And the captain didn't want to come. The crew all went aboard the lifeboat, but the captain said, I'm gonna stay here with my ship." And Captain George Hitchens said, "Captain, you've got to come now. You'll surely lose your life if you stay here, and we won't be able to come back out here a second time." So finally he relented, and he went aboard the lifeboat, and they got back safely on Smith Island. And when the captain came off the ship, he brought with him the ship's Bible. And after they had gotten ashore and gotten warmed up and so forth inside the life-saving station, he made a presentation to Captain George. He said, "Captain George, this Bible now has been in 2 shipwrecks, and it's about time for it to have shore duty. So I present it to you." And in fact, the Bible had a few years before had been on a ship in the same fleet that wrecked down in North Carolina. And the captain of the Massasoit was Captain Jacob Haskell from Deer Isle. And the Bible was passed down from Captain George to Miss Gladys. And a few months before she died, she presented me with the Bible. So I have the Bible now that came off of the Massasoit.
I remember your father's expression when he looked in the front and saw the ship that had been on previously, which his father also owned.
That's right. The Bible still had the name of the first ship under the cover.
Oh, world.
But let's see what else we can tell you about that story. And of course, you had
Skylight.
You had two skylights, two little prisms
One.
that came out of the deck of the Massasoit.
Only one.
Because only one. Because Miss Gladys used to go. The ship was on the shore for maybe 10 or 15 years before it finally broke up, and she would go out there with friends. And
Eddie Matthews'
father
asked her if she'd like to go aboard, and would she be frightened to do it, and she said no, she'd love to. And he knocked the skylight out of the deck, gave it to her.
I think he wanted to impress her.
That's going to be Harry someday. I told somebody.
Poked this prism out of the deck and gave her the prism, and it's down at your house.
If I were 50 or 60 years younger, the things that were on the Massasoit, of course, would go to Harry. And I told everybody, if I were 50 or 60 years younger, seeing my will, everyone would think that I'd been having an affair with Harry Holcomb.
well, I like to tell people that my great grandfather Schooner and I both washed up on the eastern shore of Virginia.
Oh dear. Let me see.
We have a photograph that was taken from up the top of the lighthouse looking down.
You have photographs of it.
That's the ship.
It was a schooner. It was a schooner with 4 masts.
Ship itself, the crew.
It had a crew. It had a crew of 8 or 10 people. Ships like that would have about 2 men per mast to sail it, and they made coastal trips. They would come to Norfolk for coal and take the coal back to New England. And when they got to New England, oftentimes they would load up with ice and then bring the ice down to the south. So it's said that the ships warmed the north and cooled the south.
You want to hear about this one? We had cousins in New England, and they lived one aunt lived in Newport, but most of them lived in New Haven. And Harry, when I was showing you I had a letter written to my grandmother when my grandfather died from the Dr. George Bowling-Lee, who was the resident physician of the Plaza Hotel in New York, a good friend of my grandfather's. And they, of course, owned Smith Island. And the reason I was telling you, I showed you that letter, and Harry didn't seem to be very impressed. But, I don't think my grandparents had any close association of friends associated with General Grant. I liked old Grant. I think he was a tough old duck, but I liked him. I remember his nice behavior when Lee surrendered at Appomattox, reading about it. I liked Grant, but we really didn't have much association with General Grant, so therefore I couldn't show you anything from him or his relatives. This book, one of our cousins, Will Hitchens, from New Haven, was a lawyer, and all his life, so far as I know, was one of the lawyers for Hartford Life Insurance Company. And he was transferred from New Haven to California. And he and his wife and son lived at Alameda across the bay from San Francisco. And one time he was in a bookstore in San Francisco just browsing and found this book called Heroes of the Storm. And in it, it has a story about the schooner Albert Daly, when my grandfather was captain there, and it talks about my grandfather and the rescue of the people from that Albert Daly. And he brought the book to my mother, but isn't that a strange coincidence?
Gosh.
Called Heroes of the Storm. Huh. And let's see. This one. Thelma, I know you met this gentleman, didn't you, who did this book on Southern decoys of Virginia and the Carolinas.
Flintstone?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I know you met him. He was very nice. We were sitting out on the porch, and my sister was telling him something about Smith Island. And he looked at me and said, "How old is she?" He had his notes with him. I said, "I don't know, she was in her late 80s then." And he said, "She's talking about something 60 years ago, and I can't find my notes from yesterday." I thought that was very funny. But here is a picture he has of my grandfather in it, and a mention of his little interview with my sister Gladys Mr. Capefield, great granddaughter. Okay? All of these things someday, not yours, Harry, not your skylight, not those other things you decide what you want to do with. I didn't know we were going to do this thing, so I can't renege on my will. In fact, I don't intend to write another scratch on it. I'm sick of it. What do we do with all these things?
Virginia, do you remember your sister or anything about what it, on a day-to-day basis, what it was like being a caretaker of the lighthouse or in the life-saving service?
Well, I think it was a lovely life, an interesting life, but I remember my precious little grandmother was always terrified of wind. And the reason was, of course, that's when her husband most frequently had to go out and rescue people. And he was always fighting with, but they had help. You know, do we use the word servants anymore? But they had lots of help, you know. And I remember my sister saying those houses had the most wonderful kitchens in them. In the corner, they had a fireplace and cooking area that was all lined with copper. Marvelous kitchens. And she said she learned later that they were designed by a woman. That's why the kitchens were so good, I'm sure. So, well, she loved it. She used to play on the beach. But talk about the cattle, though, and of course, sea ticks. They had to be careful of all those things. But she was allowed to go and play in shallow water.
What about
Well, they would get in the water to try to get rid of the flies. And, well, they had marvelous food. My grandfather used to go to a market in Baltimore and stock up on food for the island.
And
they do a lot of local food, seafood off the island or duck?
Well, they had, sure, they had marvelous fishing. I'm sure they had all sorts of seafood. But then they bought supplies, dried beef, and things that they would need all winter.
How many people lived on this island?
I don't know. I can tell you my favorite weather report, and we used to laugh about this. There was I think this family, forgotten their name. I do know their name, but with the story, I'm not going to tell their name. I think this family spent the summer there. In fact, one of the women in the family taught school and taught the children in summer, much to their dislike, of course. But there was a young boy who used to hang around the station with the men a lot. And my grandfather had gone home for dinner, supper, whatever. And they were supposed to send him a weather report, probably not right then, but they decided to send it in. And this little boy, they were very fond of him, but of course he didn't know what the weather report really meant. And he just told it the way he was directed to tell it. So they said, we want you to go up to Captain George. They were always playing pranks on each other there. I remember that. We want you to go up to Captain George and give him this weather report. So he did, and the little boy walked in, and he said, Captain George, I have your weather report. The weather is east by west, and the surf is down the beach. Isn't that a marvelous weather report? Isn't that a wonderful weather report? He said, get out of here. Went straight to the station because he knew exactly what they had done, of course. The child didn't know the difference. But isn't that marvelous? East by west, and the surf down the beach. I'm sure the surf was down the beach, all right. Up the beach, too.
All over.
But,
Do you think there was any competitiveness between the life-saving services or the islands themselves? Was there any rivalry or competitiveness from one island to the other?
oh, I don't think so. I think there was, all I ever heard was marvelous cooperation.
Did they have races
helped
though?
each other.
Didn't they have rowing races in the lifeboats?
I don't know.
I think they may have had rowing races.
Probably, but I don't know. But as for rivalry, I think they all helped each other when there was any sort of trouble or shipwreck. No, I don't think so.
I often
Probably more cooperative than people are now.
I often wondered if people, say, who lived on Hog Island, how they viewed the people who lived on Cobb Island, if there was um, any kind of one thinking their island was, really
Any kind of pride.
yeah.
I don't know. My great aunt lived on Cobb's, we called it Cobb's Island. And I think she came to the mainland to have a baby. And while she was there, they had a terrible storm, washed her house away. Well, they salvaged it and brought it to the mainland. She didn't go back there to live. But my mother visited her on Cobb's Island. They had a great big hotel and bowling alleys, and wealthy people from up north came down to go hunting and fishing and gamble, I think. I heard Sis say that on Sunday morning, if you were in church, you could hear the roulette things. That was Cobb's Island, not Smith Island.
All right.
No such thing as that on Smith Island.
Now, Virginia, you used to sail out to the island in a
Yes,
sailboat. Did you speak about that and the picnics and so
loved
forth?
it. My sister Lucy and I were the last. I had 3 older sisters, and Mother always said that Lucy and I were mistakes, but very nice mistakes. I'm glad she made it. I'm glad she married so young. Eloped with my father, otherwise I wouldn't have made it. But anyway, we used to, Melvin Scott, me and Gordon Scott were in high school and we married with me. And Mel used to sail us over to Smith Island. And the people in the service there at the station, most of them remembered my grandfather when I was quite young. And they were wonderful to us. And I remember we'd go on the 4th of July, it always rained. Labor Day, it always rained. Memorial Day, it always rained. So we'd sail to Smith Island. And we'd go in the station house and we'd share lunch with them. They'd share lunch with us. And we took a little portable guitar and we danced, have a lovely time. They were marvelous food. Then the sun would come out and we'd go back and anchor in the bay and fish, quite unsuccessfully, of course, stormy. But my sister Lucy and I had some of the benefit of it. I remember one time my grandfather was with us and we were sailing over to Smith Island. And we had some guests, not from the shore, who didn't know anything about Smith Island or my grandfather. And somebody said to Melvin Scott, well, he's going to hit bottom, going out of Magotha Harbor. And Mel Scott said to him, Captain George could close his eyes and sail from Magotha to Smith Island and not hit anything.
That was the landing. It was at Magotha.
You'd land on the bay side. The boathouse was on the bay side.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
And then you'd walk across the island to go swimming in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes.
But always caution never to go to that point where the bay and the ocean met, because it was extremely dangerous. Heavy undertow.
Currents. Mm-hmm.
The biggest mosquitoes I've ever seen in my life. You'd be covered with. But they had them tested one time and no malaria. Absolutely none. I remember that.
And you probably remember when the old life-saving station and lighthouse were washed away.
I remember the old lighthouse. It was brick. I've climbed it many times. Now I have trouble getting up steps. Oh, that's all right. It's nice to be around. But, and I've climbed up the new one too. I remember that lovely light that was a gift from the French government. But we'd climb to the top and walk around. But I remember they were always playing pranks on each other. My sister used to talk about that. I'm going to tell you something else I've forgotten. Let me see. I showed you that. Harry, I'm going to take this back home, but I wanted them to see it.
Oh, yes.
This is your gift to Bob and me, the Massasoit.
This was the schooner Massasoit. Now, Virginia and Miss Gladys had the original photograph, which was small, and we took all the photographs up to the Hebrew Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, and
well, you should tell them about your father.
had the professionals blow them up.
Harry's father took these old snapshots that my sister had back to Salem, with him and had them blown up. And but I remember when I was looking for this, my sister said, these old snapshots, including the Massasoit, they're in the bottom drawer of the secretary. All these old photographs, snapshots, and I couldn't find them. I remember my two older sisters were at dating age in World War I. So I said, I cannot find these snapshots. I can't get out of World War I. She said, but you're in the wrong box. So then I found it. And your father looked at them and had the Massasoit picture blown up. And
They also had a photograph of the entire crew that came off of the Massasoit and all of the men of the life-saving station. And of course, the crew looked very forlorn and unhappy. And in this photograph, you can see the jetty right here near the bow, and the lighthouse was right on shore at the jetty. And apparently, when the schooner came ashore, the bowsprit almost took the chimney off the life-saving station, according to Captain George.
My grandmother said if the wind had been the other way, it would have knocked the chimney off her head.
So very close.
In this, no, that's a picture of my grandfather. But
That's Captain George.
He retired in 1936. This is the picture. Old life-saving service. Captain George Hitchens, keeper of the station, is at the end.
And that lists the names of all of the men at the station.
Yeah,
And what year was that, Virginia?
You know, I don't
Tell?
know. People didn't write dates. They didn't even identify people on the back of the old snapshots. I don't know, Harry. In 1890, there was a lighthouse on Smith Island, as well as a life-saving station. True.
Virginia,
isn't this lovely?
Show them the picture of Captain George, because she didn't get a good shot of Captain George.
He looked so stern. Actually had a marvelous sense of humor.
He has a uniform on.
Very gentle with ladies.
He was born in 1850. Captain George D. Hitchens, Smith Island, Virginia. It doesn't say the year of the photo, but he was born in 1850 and died in 1936.
You know, I could probably figure it out. See, that's when they need my sister. She could come up with that and nothing flat. But you know, when you're young, you don't pay much attention to things that you should, and one day want to remember.
Did the life-saving service become the Coast Guard while he was out there on the island?
Yes. That's how he got to be a captain in the Coast Guard.
Okay.
1913.
1913.
I think that's the right year. I remember one time they were due for an inspection, and my grandfather told all the men, you know, get themselves all spruced up, I suppose. And he said one old gentleman was so annoyed at the prospect that he said, a man should only have one pair of trousers and then he'd know exactly where they were. I like that one too. But isn't that sweet? Did you get a picture?
And I get all of them later. Did you ever hear your family say that they ever got lonely being out on the island for so long? What holidays were like? They did other families go out to the islands for holidays, or was it?
Well, they were always having people. A lot of people went there to hunt and fish. Uh, I think they had a lot of company. This is one of my favorite stories. It was this, of course, I didn't spend that kind of time in my youth on Smith Island, but it was wonderful to grow up in our grandparents' house. My grandfather, sensible and clever man that he was, asked not my mother, his daughter, but my father, when he was retired and moved to Cape Hill, if he would like to come and live with them. I thought that was very wise indeed. And we did, and it was wonderful to grow up in their house. Somebody was always stopping by to see my grandfather. And this, I remember, well, sometimes there were people who were not educated at all, but interested. Sometimes they were beautifully educated. But his friends were so widespread and so different that in itself was a good education. And I remember a cute story too. There was a young man from North Carolina who came in town. And always you'd have them for dinner, of course. And North Carolina and Virginia always competed on who raised the larger produce, the better produce. And then let me see if I can remember what this was. Not a pumpkin. Let me see what that fruit was. Cabbage. This young man from North Carolina was talking about Captain Hitchens. We raised the best and biggest cabbage you can imagine. He said, we raise them so big that sometimes you can't make your fingers meet when you put your arms around them. Well, the conversation went on to something else, and then my grandfather started telling this story. He said one time on Smith Island, they were building a copper kettle that was so big that the men hammering on one side couldn't hear the men hammering on the other. And this young man said, Captain Hitchens, what in the world were they going to do with it? He said, cook those cabbages you were talking about. I love that story. They're wonderful.
Did they raise a lot of the food? Did they have gardens?
Oh, yes, they had gardens. I don't know. I think for a young bride, it would have been a lonely life. I do. But for families who were busy, and they always had guests. And I know what else I was going to tell you about. When I remember, and my grandmother kept it, I can't find this letter now, but long after he was retired, my grandfather got this letter addressed to Captain George Hitchens, care of Atlantic Ocean. And he got it. Isn't that wonderful? Well, of course, they could have traced it through the Coast Guard, but that they would have bothered to do that. He got it. Isn't that wonderful?
He knew some
Care
famous.
of Atlantic Ocean. And that's where he spent most of his life. How did we? Oh, we used to sail over. Or you'd go by motorboat. We had a family doctor. He called it a yacht, but I don't think it's a yacht unless it has a crew, is it? It was a launch. Very nice one.
Could be. Yes.
I think.
Did the children come to the mainland to go to school, or were they taught out on the island?
Well, they had school teachers there, but I think a lot of them came back to go to school on the mainland too.
Did they stay with relatives on the mainland?
I imagine. Grandparents, aunts, uncles.
Now, visitors to the island family, for example, wives of the men working there, could they stay overnight at the station? Were they allowed to do that? To visit?
Oh, they had houses. They lived there.
Oh, they had houses.
They
Okay.
lived there. They lived on the island.
They lived on the island.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they weren't all staying in the station. Maybe the single men stayed in the station, and
I imagine they did, but I don't. Yeah, I'm sure they did.
And the married men maybe had a little house to live in.
And more than one house. I don't know how many, but you probably saw more than one when you went. Some of them washed away, though.
They're all gone.
Ginger,
The house you painted was my grandmother's house. What?
you mentioned that perhaps young brides might be lonely on the island. What did the young women do on Smith Island that didn't have families to cook for, and how did what would their life be like?
Well, they did have a lot of coming and going of guests and people. That I remember. But I'm sure they had religious services. I don't remember a church. I really don't. But I'm sure they had religious service. My grandmother would have seen to that.
What about recreation or dancing or what did they do?
Dancing? Oh, yeah, I think they danced. I think they had dancing. Probably at the station. I have a table and some chairs that came from that station when they bought new ones.
Really?
You want them?
Sure.
So what do you think of that they would have done fun? I mean, after the workday was over, what did they do for enjoyment?
Well, let's see. They had a lot. I don't know about the day's work is done. They had a lot of beach parties. They had a lot of people I know coming from the mainland over to the island for all-day beach parties. Because I remember a story about those naughty men taking the girls' clothes and running some unmentionables up a flagpole just to tease them while they were in the water with their bathing suits. But I do know they had a lot of beach parties. Well, we did too. We did the same thing over there for the day.
You mentioned cattle before. What kind of agriculture did they have out there? Did they have other animals? And
They had cows. I think they had sheep. I'm pretty sure they had sheep.
Probably had chickens.
And chickens. I think they had the sort of things you have on a farm. I don't know the circumference of it, do you?
Not exactly.
I really don't. Much of it is beach. Much of it is washed away. The section where the old brick lighthouse was washed away, and the lighthouse with it. How close is that? I haven't been for such a long time.
you can still see the remains of that lighthouse on the
Okay. How close is the ocean to the surf to the new lighthouse now?
It's a good distance.
Isn't still?
what were some of the favorite things, for the women to fix, to cook for holidays? What kind of feast? Like we always.
Eggnog. I'm sure. Plum pudding, fruit cakes, mince pie, pumpkin pie, sweet potato pie, turkey. They had wildfowl, a lot of wildfowl, of which I'm not very fond. Ducks, geese. They ate very well. And of course they had good cooks. Some of them were men, but my grandmother always had a cook.
Virginia, during Prohibition days, did they have to chase the rum runners? Was that part of their job?
The Coast Guard? I don't think so. I think that was a special branch. What did they call them? Rum runners? What did they call them?
Rum runners. So those are the ones that were sneaking.
I think that was a separate government chore.
Sneaking the booze in.
I think so.
Now, the families of the men at the station, did they stay there during the winter, or would they come back to the mainland?
They lived there.
All year?
Yeah. I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. They did have a lot of domestic help. And they had lovely fireplaces and plenty of timber. Yeah.
These are the houses they lived in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
What were the furnishings like in the house? What were the furnishings like?
I don't know. I think my grandmother brought this from Smith Island. I remember a beautiful brass bed that she later gave to somebody who worked for her. You know, it was no longer in vogue.
Mm-hmm.
Did the government purchase the furniture to put in the houses, or was it their own?
Oh, I think they did. And when it was sold, my grandfather bought some of it. That's what I saw at his dining room table. Yeah. Had a lot of good cooks at the station. Those men were very good cooks.
Did they work at the station, or were they just cooks at the station?
Okay, what?
Were they crew members at the station? Were the cooks part of the crew at the station? The Coast Guard's life-saving station?
I expect they were, but I'm not sure about that. I don't really know. They might have been just hired.
Can you remember any stories other than shipwrecks of interesting things that were found on the beaches? Washed up on the beaches? When I walk the beaches now, I'm always looking for interesting things. I'm wondering what type of things they would find washed up on the beach that might be different than what I find washed up on the beach.
Like bottles and driftwood and so forth. I don't know. I imagine, I'm sure they had that sort of thing, but I don't know.
Was there a store out there?
Was it what?
A store.
Was there a store on the island? Was there a
I
store?
don't think so. I never heard of it, did you?
No.
They ordered a lot?
There was a store at Magota when they sailed out of Magota.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny White, Roy Bull's wife's father. I remember that store at Magotha forever until it washed away. I don't think so. They bought their supplies and imported them brought them back to the island. Now, where they stored them, I know not, but they must have had some special place for them.
So do you know how many houses you have there?
Houses? Yes, there were a number of them.
Do you know how many?
No, that I don't.
And where did this
It seems to me roughly I would guess 6 or 7, but I don't really know. They lived at that house with you, I think. I'm sure they did. Would that be lovely? Those days are gone forever. Not in my day.
Virginia, do you recall any other shipwrecks? There was another famous one. Wasn't it the African Queen? Was that the name of another famous ship?
African something. What was it? Wasn't the African Queen? That was a movie.
That was a movie. All right.
That's the Tracy and Catherine Hepburn. There was an African something, but I forget the name of the ship. Maybe it's in the book. I don't know that. What that was? I don't know. Do a quick flip. If you see anything that says African Queen, you think African something. I just happen to have this in here with the other thing in that school. You don't have to take a picture. It's my grandmother on her 99th birthday. Isn't that precious?
Virginia, we need to make a copy of that.
Huh?
You need to make a copy. The print is disappearing.
I do have it in a little frame.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, sweet. She was so pretty. I inherited nothing from her except her slight build.
Virginia, what happened if someone died on the island? Like from a shipwreck?
Oh, now you're asking Coast Guard procedure. I'm sure the Coast Guard was notified. And they took over from there.
How about someone living on the island? If someone passed away that was living on the island?
All of that would have been handled, I think, on the mainland. I don't remember any burial ground at all. Don't remember that. Unlike Tangier.
Do you remember any other stories of Smith Island from your family?
No, but I haven't given it a lot of thought. Really haven't. I have in here a letter. I just saw this the other day, yesterday. September the 28th, 1904. Very truly, R.E. Lee. Apparently someone asked my grandfather to ask Dr. Lee if they could buy some property, and he wrote about it. They never did sell any of it, to my knowledge. For a while it was owned by Mr. Campbell, very wealthy man in New York, and later went back to the Lee heirs, and I was glad to see that happen.
How did that happen? Went back to the Lee family.
They bought it back.
Well, they bought it back.
I'm sure they did. When I went to New York to live, my grandmother was still living, and she wanted me to call Dr. Lee, who was living there then still, hadn't retired as resident physician of the plaza, but still living in New York, and Mr. Campbell. And I called them both. And Dr. Lee had just been to Washington Lee for his grandson's graduation, and I was to have tea with him the next week. But he said while he was there, he had a fall, had broken his hip. And when I got back, the old gentleman had pneumonia and died very suddenly, which was very sad. I wanted to meet him. My grandmother was very disappointed because apparently he was a delightful person. And Mr. Campbell was pleasant, but he said, I always heard he lost all his money, Mr. Campbell, in the crash. Well, when I saw that New York address, I said to my grandmother, he had lost all his money. By no means had he lost all his money. He might not be as happy, not only as much profit, but he hadn't lost all his money. I have to shake it. Excuse me. I wish I could remember something more. Let me see. I had something else in here. Oh, I know what I have here.
Okay.
A bag lady. This had a black leather case, but I don't know what I did with it when I had this on the bookcase first. This is a little
Oh my goodness.
lens that my grandfather always kept with him. Now I have at home that I think I'll ultimately give you a big one about it's about this size. My grandfather had on Smith Island, like this but big.
Yes.
So I'll.
What was that lens used for?
Well, I think he just used it for his personal use, but it is a good one, isn't it?
And the big one, did he use that for reading? Maybe.
I don't know whether he did it to look out at the ocean or what. I really don't. And my sister took very good care of it. So. And I know he did have it on Smith Island.
It was a lot like a magnifying glass.
Yeah, it's about this big. Good size.
Gosh.
And heavy.
Virginia, is there anything else that you would like to tell us before we
Close up. Close up.
Virginia,
Let's see.
the boats you used to sail over in Smith Island, did they have one mast? Was it called a bateau? Do you recall?
A mainsail, and what do you call the
A jib.
big one? Jib.
A jib.
Those two.
Okay.
This is a picture of my grandfather, and there's a picture of that Coast Guard boat.
Oh, we've got to tell about this.
Life saving.
This is the boat that they used to
rescue people.
Rescue the crew of the Massasoit. And initially, the men at the life-saving station were a little reluctant to take this boat out because they were afraid it would get banged up and get lost on the shore. And Captain George said, "Never mind, don't worry about that. The government will buy us a new one."
You all tell that as a joke, but I really think what he meant was his first duty was to save the lives of his crew, and one life would be too much to lose. That's really what he meant. Wasn't that pretty?
It's beautiful. Do you have any others in there?
No, just a picture of my grandmother and my grandfather when they were young. My sister had miniatures made by Bacroc in New York from these, I think.
What the distinction between a rescue attempt, how bad did bad have to get before the captain decided it was too bad to send his crew out?
Well, the decision is entirely his, isn't it?
It's entirely his. I think they would do it under almost any circumstances. Now, initially, when the Massasoit came ashore, I think it was too far out to reach with the breeches buoy. And so that's why they had to get in the boat, go around, and they actually went up to the boat, to the schooner, to take the crew off. And then they came back with the crew and the life-saving boat back to the leeward side of the island. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that.
Oh, I think it would depend entirely on the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I think most captains would have done everything within their power to save their crew.
Well, a breeches buoy, and we have an example here, I
thought I saw one downstairs.
it's a great big life ring with what looks like a pair of big pants hanging from the middle. And they could run this out on some pulleys on a line to the ship. And then someone would have to get in that, and their legs would dangle through the pair of pants, and then they would haul them ashore on this dangling from this buoy. And I imagine on a few occasions they got dipped in the water because the cable would sag a little bit in the middle.
Do you think they took some of that idea for helicopters when they rescued people?
They probably did. Now we can pluck them off with a helicopter.